Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program Business Point on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program. On today's edition, we'll be looking at the Nigerian Customs free onboarding levy, 4% levy that has been introduced. We're going to be going through the reasons why the Nigerian Customs Service had this, introduced and announced, and also we've gotten series of reactions from individuals, business owners, SMEs, and the Chamber of Commerce have also reacted, and also the former Senate President Bukola Saraki has also reacted differently based on the current introduction of this levy. Now, let me bring you up to speed with what the Nigerian Custom has to say in light of this, and then they made mention of the fact that the Nigerian Custom announced an introduction of free onboarding levy on all imported goods. According to the spokesman of the service, Abdullahi Meiwada, says the introduction of the levy is in line with the provision of Nigerian Customs Service Act of the year 2023. The FOB charge, which is calculated based on the value of imported goods, including the cost of goods and transportation expense incurred up to the port of loading, is essential to driving the effective operation of the service. Also, on the other hand, we've seen economics react differently with the fact that they say, explain further that the development would increase the cost of operation of small and medium enterprises, especially those companies that are dependent solely on imported raw materials for their production. This is also going to hamper the financial sector. Looking at it from the expert side, where experts have said this is also going to raise an alarm of implementation of 4% onboarding levy on imports, which would also increase the country's inflation. On the other hand, the former Senate President Bukola Saraki, said that the development is stressing that it would add to the burden of many Nigerians who are already finding it hard to solve their day-to-day cost of living, given the fact that prices of food items in the market are still on the rise. The former Senate President also knocked the Nigerian Customs Service for raising operational costs, which he says is estimated at over $1.5 billion annually in a country where over 129 million Nigerians are living below poverty line, in which the economy is really in a harsh condition. And now importers, if this implementation or this 4% hike just gets implemented, importers would also pass this down to consumers, and then at the end of the day, we are going to see ripple effects where cost of food items again is actually going to go on. So at this point now, we've seen different Nigerians reacting, and then also this implementation now is not just restricted to luxury items, but it's also going to across all sectors of importation. So all of this now is actually going to hamper the economy, and also we are looking at President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's 2025 budget, which also says that 15% of inflation is going to be capped out. Now, with this current introduction of 4% FOB levy that is set to be introduced to Nigerians by the Nigerian Customs Service, is also going to hamper that projection, though a whole lot of policy analysts have actually reacted differently, that come 2026, we're expected to see towards December 2025, and then going in 2026, then is when we're going to expect Nigerian inflation to come down to around 27 to 26%. But now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said he is going to bring it down to 15%. On that note, now we are looking at the Nigerian Custom increasing its levy. That means on FOB, and then there are also other charges that the customs also add to imported goods. So all of this now is also going to look to skyrocketing the prices of items in the market, which is also going to facilitate the rise of Nigerian inflation instead of curbing it down. So we will be having this conversation, and also I have a policy expert who is also going to help us understand this, and then look at the futuristic plan on what this is going to actually benefit Nigerians, or if it's going to cause more damage. We'll be going on a quick break, and then when we return back, Business Point continues.
All right, so are we good? Can you guys hear me?
yes, many thanks for staying with us. And if you're just joining, this is Business Point on Global Television. Now we are about to have the conversation on the impact of the free on board policies that is being introduced by Nigerian custom. Now I have my guest who is joining us virtually, who is a policy expert who will help us understand this. Good morning, Mr. Johnson Ulubenro. Many thanks for joining us to this edition of the program.
Good morning, Samuel. Nice to be here.
Yes, and then I would say a very happy belated New Year to you.
Exactly. Same to you and the entire Global TV family and our listeners at home. I think it's my first time here this year.
Yes, it is. And we have a big one here with us where we are looking at the Nigerian custom increasing 4% on FOB levies. What's your reaction to that?
I also share the same sentiment with what some other analysts have said. Truth be told, the new act has come into operation since April last year or so. I think that was when it was passed. The new Nigerian Customs Service Act of 2023. That was passed into law around 2023 April. However, what we all expected is that when the new act is passed into law like that, then the administrators ought to roll out what we call implementation guidelines, just to prepare everybody, as to how they intend to implement the provisions, the new provisions of the act, so that everybody can then adjust and then make adequate plans within their business operations. But what we saw, I took time to read the, I don't know whether to call it a notice or a directive, and it appears that they want to implement immediately. And that in itself even violates some of the provisions of the Establishment Act. You cannot just wake up one day, one morning and say, okay, this is what we are doing and is taking place, is becoming effective immediately. So that is my first reservation. There are businesses who need time, weeks, and even months perhaps to make the necessary adjustment, particularly those who are using ERP softwares. They need to recustomize, their softwares to be able to accommodate the new rate, and because when you talk about importation business, we're talking in several hundred of millions and even billions. 4% is big deal. And just like you said, it's not on some select import items. From what we saw and read, the 4% is on all categories of imports. I stand to be corrected, but based on my understanding of what is read, they are referring to Section 18 subsection 1 of the newly enacted Act, which says they are allowed to charge a minimum, at least 4% free on board charge. So I feel, first things first, I think it was horribly done. And don't forget, Samuel, that just this apart, right, the Nigerian Port Authority also increased their own rate by 15%.
Yes.
15%. Within just days apart, 15%. And while people are just still trying to take that in, of course, they made a good argument that, they haven't increased their rate for years, and the rate that they were charging is no longer at par with the current realities, economic realities, especially with the rising inflation that the cost has skyrocketed in the last couple of years, whereas they have consistently charged the same rate. So and already we have all kind of multiplicity of levies and duties within the importation environment. So this is also going to add more burdens to what is already the practice. And we were all looking forward to the year 2025, where we were hoping to see, some harmonization in some of these levies and duties. If you recollect, the Nigerian tax bill is still currently in the National Assembly, and one of the things that the bill seeks to address is this issue of multiplicities, of taxations and levies, such that we can harmonize all these levies from across all the various collection agencies. Just harmonize them, and then simplify them to just make it easy and simple and convenient. But with what they have done now, it is looking as if the system is working against itself. You can't be trying to make some gain with the Nigerian tax bill, and then on the contrary, you are issuing 15% increase here, implementation of 4% there. I think that is not. I don't see them working together in harmony that way.
Okay. We've seen different reactions. Even the former Senate president has also reacted to this, and he made mention of the fact that the annual projection, and then for imports annually, it's around 71 trillion naira. And then with this policy being ignited now and introduced, it's going to generate more 2.84 trillion naira. But that's not the point we're looking at now. Let's keep those numbers in a place. So we'll get back to them hopefully. Now, the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce have also reacted to the fact that this implementation shouldn't be something that is going to be, pushed forward, in the sense that, yes, we're looking at it from the legality aspect now, where the Nigerian custom has quoted their law, and then the Lagos State Chambers also reacted, and also quoting that stakeholders have not been properly fed in the way that they've not properly gone through all of these policies before it gets the free onboarding 4% introduction and implemented. But now let's look at the SMEs. Now, how do you think now this is going to impact small and medium enterprises in Nigeria, given the fact that they are the key drivers of every nation's, of Nigerian GDP, and also they are the hope that is going to help cut down Nigerian inflation? But with these policies and all of these levies being introduced, how do you think the ASMEs will be able to survive in a harsh economic situation that we've found ourselves?
It depends on who you are asking and who is speaking for who. If you ask the government, their thinking will be that this will, because remember in the 2025 budget,
yes,
the president is a bit ambitious in terms of what he hopes the inflation figures will be, at the end of the year, which is pegged at 15%, which many analysts, including myself, are a bit pessimistic when it comes to that number. We feel the number is a bit ambitious, looking at all the other indicators. However, the whole idea is that they want to discourage imports, right? The more expensive it becomes for you to import, the more you want to look elsewhere. You want to look more towards the direction of locally fabricated products and so on and so forth. But we also have to be realistic with ourselves. If you look at most of what we consumed, a great percentage of it is still being currently imported into the country. Even people who claim to be manufacturers, mostly assembly plants. If you look at the inputs that goes into those manufacturing processes, you will realize that many of the inputs are still being sourced overseas. And so what that means is that somebody is going to pay for that cost, definitely. That 4% is going to be passed down.
Yeah.
If it's going to cost the manufacturers more to import, that also means that their profit margin is going to shrink. So definitely and naturally, they are going to pass that cost, to the consumers, and which means that the cost of what they produce is also going to go up. And if it is not even properly managed, that may even lead to more inflation in some sense of it, even though the intention of government, is to curb inflation. But you now discover that things now become quite expensive and out of reach, particularly for the SMEs. Like you rightly said, for the SMEs, things will become more expensive in the long run, and if care is not taken, that may even lead to some sort of inflation. So clearly, and the argument that we are going to be able to increase our revenue from imports, I don't know if that's I don't know if that is exactly something we should be happy about, really. I would be more excited if we're talking about increasing our revenue from exports, because that way we are selling more naira, in exchange for dollar. But for this one, I don't see how that would directly impact on our FX. If anything, it will do the opposite to our FX. But if it's the other way around, if it's more of the import, we are doing more to ensure that we're exporting more. That way we know that we are bringing more naira to the global market, and then in exchange for dollar, of course. So it is neither here nor there. But I think for me, the major issues, in terms of legalities, does the Nigerian Customs Service, do they have the power to do so? The answer is a capital yes. They have the power. It's within their legal and legislative framework to do so. But have they followed due process or the due protocol in implementing it? I will also say no. They need to carry stakeholders along, and there is still another 1%. There's still another 1% somewhere that is being debated. So 1% here, 4% there, 15% there. I think at this time, and looking at our realities, I think quite honestly, I'm not sure this is the right time to do so.
Since the coming in of this administration, timing has been something experts yourself has been making mention of that. A whole lot of initiatives and then introduction and policies are being introduced at wrong timing. So now let's look at it now. We are looking at the current realities of Nigerian economy, and also we would have been several arguments that the MBS have not actually been realistic with the current economic situation of Nigeria. But now we are seeing this, levy, this free onboarding levy being introduced. Do you think it's actually, like you rightly mentioned now, timing? Do you think in the next couple of months, if the Nigerian Customs agrees with what the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce are saying, if they agree to suspend it, do you think in the next couple of months or in a year's time, do you think this policy is actually going to be fully introduced and implemented?
Oh yeah, because it's the provision has already been. I don't want to say sneaked into. I want to use the word smuggled into the act. So the act has been passed, and this is why we encourage Nigerians to be more involved with these legislative processes. So when Nigerians hear that an act is, there's a bill that is being proposed to the National Assembly, I want to seriously recommend Nigerians need to get involved. What we do a lot of times is that we cry after the fact. It's already too late. We should have started crying from when that bill was proposed, to the National Assembly. I know a few persons had one or two reservations at the time, and I have seen instances where we've gotten it right. I think it's with the Kama bill at a time, when Nigerians came together, united, Muslims and Christians, and everybody said no. There are certain provisions that they felt was not going to help the country, and we prevailed on them at the time. So Nigerians need to be more involved, not just after the thing has been passed into law, and then we start to cry. So even if it would be nice if they soft pedal and suspend it, you know, and also we have like our national tax policy also gives, you know, more like a notice period of 90 days. But then I know that can be argued because the Nigerian Customs Service will tell you that this thing has been enacted as far back as April of 2023. I'm sure that will be their argument, and they are giving more than enough period. But beyond just the enactment of it, there should have been some sort of guidelines, you know, some roadmap that, okay, this is the implementation guideline. We will implement this provision at this time. We saw that with the withholding tax regulation bill. You know, even though it has a different enactment date, then the administrators came and gave some implementation guideline and said, okay, even though this thing had been enforced in September of 2024, we will not effect it until January of 2025. And when they eventually implemented it 1st of January 2025, nobody was complaining,
yes.
you know, because they have done the needful. I would have expected Nigerian Customs Service to also do the same.
All right. Okay, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for taking our time to join us on today's edition of Business Points. We appreciate all of your inputs.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and that's how much time will permit us to take on today's edition. But before we close the curtain of today's edition, now, this is actually, if this actually gets passed, it's actually going to cost a whole lot to Nigerians who are already struggling with day-to-day costs of living. And again, Nigerians will be paying most of these levies and all of these additional taxes from their backs, looking at how harsh the Nigerian economy is. Well, the Nigerian custom can just take a cue